Welcome back to the Canadian International Ekamra Sports Literature Festival. I'm your host, Teddy Katz. Our final session of the day is an important one in these COVID-19 times. It's about mental health, sport, and resilience. I'm joined by two authors who have a lot to say about this topic. Kevin Rempel is a world champion and Paralympic bronze medalist in sledge hockey and has written a book, Still Standing, When You Have Every Reason to Give Up, Keep Going. Kristen Worley, a former world-class cyclist, will also speak about her book, Women Enough, How a Boy Became a Woman and Changed the World of Sport. Kevin, Kristen, welcome.
Teddy, it's wonderful to be here.
Thanks for having us, Teddy.
It's wonderful to have you. Kevin, let me start with you. And Kristen, I want you to chime in on this too. Mental health and issues in sports, how important is this topic right now, given what everybody's going through with COVID-19?
Well, the subject of mental health has continued to, be more and more prevalent in sport over the most recent years. There's a lot more athlete stories that are continuing to come out. And my post-Olympic depression happened in 2014, 2015 times when the Canadian Olympic Committee and the Canadian Paralympic Committee had just put together their initiative called Game Plan to support athletes with mental health and well-being. So that was where my story started to kind of surface. But, in this world that we're living in today, the same principles that us athletes have to apply are the exact same principles that everyone else can apply in their own life about, being clear on, what you allow into your mind, the nutritional behaviors you accept, the exercise you continue to prioritize, and just simple practices to maintain mental health and well-being.
Kristen, what about you? How much are you hearing about people just struggling right now, and especially athletes who are used to controlling their world around them, setting goals and then going for them, and suddenly that world is now turned upside down?
Teddy, it's an enormous issue. It's always, even before pre-COVID-19, there's a bigger discussion going on in regards to athlete health and wellness. And so this is a tremendous issue, and it's only been elevated because of COVID-19. And I know in the areas around diversity specifically as well, it becomes even a bigger issue in terms of support from families and from community and from the sporting community, and the need for greater outreach for athletes who are dealing with different areas of diversity that even creates even a broader separation in their daily lives, and the importance and values that sport brings to that creating that linkage that's so necessary to keep athletes focused and in staying in health and in mind and their commitments to the daily life. And for many competing athletes right now who are kind of in between these challenges when international events are occurring and so on, that are constantly being canceled, it's a day-to-day grind for them just to try to keep focused and healthy.
Kevin, are you hearing from a lot of people as well? People who know because you've been so open about your story, so they come to you and say, "Hey, Kevin, how did you get through it? What can I learn from that?" And who share things that they may not share with everybody?
Yeah, for sure. In personal conversations, I had the opportunity to get down to the root of some of the challenges. But to be honest with you, it doesn't matter if it's a personal or a public conversation. Ultimately, we're all struggling with similar challenges that are very universal. Dealing with the self-destructive behavior, the thought process, the limiting beliefs or lack of belief in what we're facing, and then using basic strategies to overcome those beliefs and challenges. And during COVID, one of the things that I did as a speaker is I developed an online digital program called the Resilience Toolbox. And everything that's inside the program I've lived, and specifically it's based around cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. And I say that not to give perception that I'm a therapist in any way, but when I was struggling with depression, suicidal thoughts, learning how to walk again after being paralyzed, all of the things that I did are basic strategies that every one of us can implement, such as, writing your thoughts down through journaling, gratitude practice, vision boards, quote boards, nutrition, sleep, exercise. Those are the simple staples that are universal and timeless that we can all apply in our life.
I want to ask you about that. I want to unpack something for our viewers today, because you talk in your book, Kevin, about basically a few episodes where you were dealing with some dark periods, and as you said, and you got out of those dark periods, but it was a very difficult struggle for a period of time when your dad had an accident, ended up in a wheelchair, and ended up dying by suicide. How important was it for you in terms of being a turning point for you to start to open up about your mental health issues and what you were dealing with in order to get the assistance that you needed?
Yeah, what I would say to that for anyone listening right now is that no one knows you're struggling unless you say so.
Right.
When it comes to mental health, everyone is so good at putting on a mask, and a lot of the emphasis in our world, and especially in the corporate world too, is about identifying others. When what I've discovered, what's more important than identifying others is if we can identify ourselves. And so that's where, again, writing strategies come into play as being very effective to get your thoughts down on paper, because in your head, it's an intangible idea. You can't necessarily grasp it. And so you'll cycle your negative thoughts over and over again. But if you take the time to write them down and put them on paper, now all of a sudden they become tangible. Now they are real. And now you can see them more than once that you would just think about them, because you can actually you can hold them. And then once you see them written down on paper, the beauty of that is not only do you make them real, but then you start to see that you would never speak to anyone else the way that you speak to yourself.
Very interesting. Kristen, I wonder if you could pick up on that. Your book, it basically is your journey, and if I can say so, your struggle in terms of coming to terms with your identity. And I'm wondering how important it was for you in terms of a turning point in order to sort of talk about that openly. How important was that in terms of your journey and in terms of your mental well-being?
Wow, it's been a lifelong journey, Teddy, to this point in my life, and I can really tell you, in terms of me kind of turning that corner, has been, it's only been in the last couple of years where I've been able to kind of really see the benefits of that, because of the, for me, from the very beginning of my journey, when it came to my gender identity, I was very much alone. This is back in the 70s, as you can well imagine. I mean, we didn't talk a lot of issues around, let alone cultural diversities, let alone sexuality and gender. So for me, growing up in a middle class kind of Canadian sporting family, I had all the opportunity in the world, being kind of pursuing those trajectories. But for me, I couldn't be more alone, because I had no frame of reference. I didn't know actually what the things were going on for me as a young child. I mean, I'm talking 2 and 3, 4 years old. So, I mean, I was very isolated through my childhood, and very and because I didn't know how in terms of my reactions to my diversity and the reasons why it was happening, and I was kind of I was literally living 2 lives. And so for me, it was the process. Was a matter of sequence of events between my early days of my life to my teenage life to my beginning of my adult life, and then kind of my career. It happened in various different stages, because through that trajectory over probably 30 years, there was a lot of weight thrown at me, a lot of unacceptance of diversity. I learned growing up in kind of what I call in my book the pyramid, and where I lived in this kind of protected environment. And it was only when I stepped out and recognized and came public about my diversity, even within my own family, I realized what it meant to be diverse, and what the potential challenges would be. I never realized to the extent and the extreme of it would be. And I witnessed that through my sporting career, because I transitioned at various levels in my career. And so I saw kind of the ins and outs of that, the positive and the negatives and the losses that came with it. And then here I am circling back towards the end of my career, where I've retired, and in my professional career in my design world has now come full circle, where I've taken these advantages and learnings from my past and the negativities that have come with it, And now I'm plugging it back in through my design career, back into the sporting community, and also elevating it through some of the things I'm doing in design and architecture, to be able to elevate community, health and well-being, and a lot of the lessons I've learned from the field of play to align to improving people's lives and communities around the world.
It almost seems, Kristen, that sport was both a blessing and a curse at different times in your journey. When you were younger and you were an elite water skier and you were quite good at it, and it seemed to help you fit in at that time. And then later, as you transitioned, you tried to compete, and your dream was to compete at the Olympics as a cyclist, as one of the first transgendered cyclists to compete at the Olympics. Then it seemed to become a bit of a curse. I wonder if you could take us through that.
Sure. Teddy, thank you. I mean, my water skiing career came to me very easily as a young person, and then actually, in terms of that part of my life, my sport became my friend. It became my kind of my second identity, where I kind of, if you can imagine, so like living behind a glass window and no one can see. It was kind of my protector. And so when I engaged in water skiing, I realized, because I accelerated very quickly in the sport as a junior, and then I went up and competed internationally for Canada on the national team. And I realized that this kind of secondary identity became my protector. It enabled people to see me in another way, that I could actually see myself and protect myself from the struggles I was having internally, to be able to kind of live in two different lives. Again, at that time, I didn't even know what this meant around my diversity. I didn't know what gender diversity was. I was just living the experience of what it was living in a diverse life, in terms of my gender at that time, because there wasn't a lot of knowledge or support. So when I transitioned, and then I went into the sport of cycling, as the sport of water skiing, as probably many people don't know, it's an Olympic affiliated sport, but it's not a sport that goes to the Olympic Games. So for me, I went into the sport of cycling. I was the first athlete in the world to be gender tested under the 2003 Olympic policies on transitioned athletes in engaging in Olympic activity or international sporting activity. And then through that period of time, through my gender verification, was a very difficult road, because I was gender tested by a system of sport that didn't understand what it meant to be diverse. The other thing is when I went through the gender testing and the process, which is in the foreword of my book, by the way, talks about the experience where I was in front of two panels of groups of 4 men over a couple days, to which I was distinctly talked about my sexuality, my physicality, my gender, questions being asked of me in a process that I was put into which these individuals wouldn't have done to their own daughters. And I always kind of talk about it as kind of being, it's not even that they felt they could do this, but they felt they had a right to do it. But in fact, even more so, I deserved it. And so that was kind of under the oppression and how this was addressed with me. And this was policy coming down from the International Olympic Committee, to which I was sexually and psychologically violated through that. I'm a very conservative person, and growing up in, as I was saying earlier, a kind of middle-class Canadian athlete family. I was overpowered in this environment. So during my career process, in terms of my transition, I was losing my health throughout my career, until the point where my body could no longer participate in elite sport. So I brought those attentions to the international levels of sport, the IOC, the World Anti-Doping Agency, and so on. And it was an interesting thing, because for me, all of a sudden, I started seeing sport in a very negative way. First of all, from the impact of my gender testing, but more importantly is the power of sport, that kind of top-down approach, and lack of athlete support, to where I actually became threatening because of the knowledge base that I had incurred in regards to the science and support necessary to support athletes like me, to make sure that they're competing in sport in a health and well-balanced arena with other athletes. And So I actually, what I call very much a mafia top-down approach in attempts by the leadership of sport to oppress me from being able to communicate the accuracy of against these policies that have been being implemented around the world against other athletes. And my goal has always been to be able to ensure the safety and participation of all athletes in sport, and that we take and respect the field of play and the things that we align to and those values that we align to in sport. We ensure that everybody has the opportunity to participate and seek their truest potential. And through this particular lens that I've experienced, has had that high and then that low experience, and now I'm coming full circle in this past year, which I can talk about a bit today. Through my experiences being able, now I'm helping these federations to be able to better understand the implications of their policy. So it's come 180 degrees to where I began, or 360 degrees to where I began, literally almost 20 years ago.
Let me just turn to Kevin for a second, because sport has also been kind of a lifeline for you. But then when your career ended, you talk about you having more issues in terms of your identity. So I wonder if you could talk about how sport has both helped and hindered your mental wellness, Kevin.
Well, for sure, sport, like for so many, gives you meaning and purpose in your life. And especially living with a disability, after being paralyzed, I was looking to find a new direction. And I rode freestyle motocross, jumping dirt bikes. I could still ride my bike after my accident, thankfully, but not to the extent I used to. And so when I discovered parasport, that brought new life. It also brought a new community into my world and rejuvenated zest for life, if you will. And it was amazing. And plus it also brought my physiotherapy to a new level. Like, I was doing therapy to learn how to walk again, but once I got in the gym training for sport, everything I was doing already was just 10x, because I was now a full-time athlete, and it did wonders for me. The thought that I would share around, transitioning out of sport and life after sport, what I experienced is that I didn't have any plan, other than, like, I had a small plan in my head, but I never really put much effort or thought into what that life would look like after sport. And now, having gone through the transition, what I've discovered and learned is that the key to quick recovery is to have something to go for right away. And as an athlete, we spend, of course, in Olympic years, it's a 4-year cycle for any games. And so, if you could, say in your second year or your third year, heading into that fourth year, start to plan what would that next year one look like after that 4-year cycle ends, would help make the transition a lot easier. There was some identity loss around, being a professional athlete or Team Canada athlete, national athlete. But bigger than that, I found, is that having some sort of a purpose in what you do is really important. And transitioning out of sport, if you could shift that purpose away from your own personal achievements to giving back and helping others in some way, I found is what really helped pull me up out of bed after I went through that post-Olympic depression.
What's interesting, Kevin, is you talk about your lessons for other athletes, but I think your lessons go beyond other athletes to people in general right now, and especially in the times that we're living with COVID, where, as you say, people are wearing masks and they're maybe not sharing what they're going through, and a lot of people are struggling. And in your book, what I found really interesting is you talk about your life after Sochi, after going to the Paralympics, winning a bronze medal. Suddenly you're doing a lot of public speaking, and you write that the speaking engagements are drying up. You aren't earning money. You basically have spent everything that you had. So you write in the book, so I had a house, I had 2 rental properties, a brand new truck, a Harley Davidson motorcycle, a world championship ring, a Paralympic bronze medal, my health, and I wasn't happy. So I'm wondering what kinds of things you're starting to hit rock bottom again in your journey, and you're battling with your mental health. I'm wondering what you did that might be helpful for others right now going through COVID-19 struggles. What you did to win back your mental health.
Right here, it's a notepad on my wall. Can everybody see this?
What does it say?
Spiral up.
Spiral up. not down.
Okay.
Fantastic.
So this is all of the content from my program, but this yesterday was on my Instagram story and somebody lit up when they saw this. And this specifically came from my post-Olympic depression, because what I did specifically, number one, is that when I was in the emergency psychiatric ward in St. Joseph's Hospital in Hamilton, long story short, I'm there. There was a young boy. He was in the room next to me. He had cuts on his arms. Of course, mental health was a major issue. And so he gets upset. He's in the hallway. Security's called. And it was a shocking moment for me. One of those moments where like you snap out of it. And what I realized in that moment was that, number one, I wanted to and needed to get better to help people like him, because I was not in that severe of a situation.
Right.
And the second thing that I realized is that in that moment, that's when I just, like, everything kind of flashed in my eyes, and I realized all of the things that I had done wrong post games. I had no goals. So this is the downward spiral. I had no goals. I stopped working out. I stopped eating right, staying up late, drinking, began isolating myself because I was depressed, and then and it just went in this downward spiral. And so here I was in the emergency psychiatric ward. I'd never, thankfully, ever hurt myself to this day. But what I realized is that was my rock bottom moment at that time. And that I said to myself, how could I spiral up, not down? And I just reversed the process. And so when I look at what are the things that you can do, that we can all do to help build our mental resilience. And like I said, there's writing techniques, there's goal setting, there's habits, there's mentorship, etc. But at the core, some of the easiest things that we can all do that I knew if I couldn't do all of these things right away, I couldn't necessarily figure out that next life goal immediately. The one thing that I knew I could do, that I had to do, is that I had to eat every single day. And if I could at least get my nutrition on track, then probably and likely I'll start to feel better, which will help me make better cognitive decisions and have more energy to make the next right decision. And so it started with just getting good groceries. And then I was calling my personal trainer and said, hey, I don't got the cash, but I need to commit to this because this is my well-being, that I'll find the money. Just I want accountability. So it was nutrition and exercise, which helped me become more physically tired, to sleep better. And so I got bang, 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 1, 2, 3, and then that started the spiral up. And then that was a progress to get myself out of depression.
Fantastic.
Kristen, you're nodding your head. Did any of that ring a bell for you?
Absolutely. I'm really hearing what Kevin's saying, because it really does come down to that. I mean, the one thing about being athletes, we all carry along in our journey is about that discipline and that consistency every day in, day out of our commitments through our careers. And certainly I know in my own journey, and this is a goal that I've been on right now, is about my physical health and well-being. And I mean, at the end of the day, that's all we've got, right? I mean, that's the foundation of who we are as individuals. And the issue is around diet and exercise, especially in the current pandemic and that we're sitting in, the importance of being able to be somehow physically active at some level, and also to help to maintain a level of mental health and day-to-day normalcy in our lives. Because I know within my own career right now, I'm very busy doing a bunch of other things, and how our world is changing, how we communicate. I'm finding that it's very easily work 7 days a week if you let it. And so it's important that you recognize that your health is part of that foundation. And as I was just actually writing down what Kevin was saying in terms of the nutritional health helps you with your decision process. That couldn't be more true. I mean, that is the very foundation, especially in terms of a mental health situation, is to ensure that your nutrition levels are right, to help maintain those levels in the synapse in our brain and our overall well-being. So we are making the appropriate decisions during times that are very stressful. So no, I really connected with what Kevin had to say.
You know, it's interesting. My daughter is very big into meditation these days. And I was just listening that, you know, people are attributing Jamal Murray, the big NBA star from Canada, one of the things that he does a lot of is meditation. So when he gets into those key moments in the games, he feels calm and doesn't feel any pressure, any stress. I think the holistic approach, not sport is all about the physicality, but the mental side is not something that we spend a lot of time talking about over the years. So I'm curious, Kevin, as a male in sport, is it sort of seen as not something that you would do as a male to open up? I remember talking to a few NHL players from years ago, you know, to talk about something that they were maybe dealing with when it comes to mental health. Was something that they would struggle to do. Is that now seen as being not such a struggle, something that's more normal now?
It's becoming more normalized. Over the last 10 years, I started playing with Team Canada in 2010 until 2015. And during that 5-year period, it was still, I don't want to say the word frowned upon, but it wasn't as talked about or maybe accepted. And I didn't speak up. Well, I didn't really struggle until I was finished playing. So it's not like really during my time on the team I had any decision, like anything to speak up about around depression specifically. But it's becoming more accepted. There's so many stories that have came out in the last 5 years that it's more normal to speak about. When you talk about meditation, I think that prior, like again, in that 5-year period, I dabbled with it. But it was when I went through post-Olympic depression that actually I started using the Headspace app regularly. And earlier this year throughout COVID, I actually just clocked a total cumulative now for almost 5 years worth, but I've clocked 10,000 hours on the Headspace app. And it's because I just, post-sport, I started to discover how powerful it really was. And specifically throughout COVID, meditation is what really helped me get through those first 3 months the most out of all of those techniques the techniques I've described.
And did you say to me that because you had been through what you had been through, all of the struggles in the past, that dealing with what you're dealing now with COVID wasn't as much of a struggle as it might have been for some others?
Yeah.
So tell me about that from your point of view, Kristen.
It's really interesting because in my sporting career, in my colleagues, but also in my career, in around the diversity, it's been interesting when we had the major lockdown in the spring in Toronto and Canada specifically. I remember many of my colleagues, we were talking about this because a lot of the through our diversity challenges that we experienced in our lives leading up to this moment, it's interesting, Teddy and Kevin, is what you learn how to survive. You learn, I lived in a society where I was having to literally survive on the edge due to my diversity and the oppression that occurred over a period of X amount of years. And a lot of young people face those same social impacts, and it affects their day-to-day life, their living, and their career trajectories. So inevitably it affects your ability to in terms of your finances and so on. So you learn certain techniques to allow yourself to survive when you don't have those support networks. And so it's interesting now that we're in a COVID, in this position with the pandemic, is that those survival techniques that we learned all those years ago are now positioning us now and kind of saying, well, I've felt the oppression, I felt this, and this is how I've responded to this. And so we've already kind of learned those lessons, whereas people who may have not experienced this in their lives for whatever reason are now learning it for the first time and having to learn these techniques and learning how to survive. Yeah, so it's very interesting.
Can I jump in on something? Because you just nailed it too. Like Kristen, like you said, some people are just learning it for the first time. Can I take 2 seconds? I want to show you something here. I'm gonna give you a behind the scenes look. So I'm grabbing my wired webcam with a three meter cord right now. I'm gonna show you. This is on the other side of my office, and I just was drawing this up, but this is like a mock-up of my life journey. Normal life, dad's suicide. Freestyle motocross, broke my back. Walking again, dad passes away. Team Canada, cut from the team, sledge hockey experience, COVID. Now what?
Yeah, bang on.
Now here's the thing. Here's the lesson for everyone. In the words of Tony Robbins, is that most people are celebrated in public for what they practiced for years in private.
Yeah.
If you were to draw a line through the roller coaster, everybody wants to pay attention to what's up here. This is the celebration. These are the podium moments. These are the headlines. These are the articles. But here, this is where the resilience is developed. This is where it's developed. That's where it's developed. And if you take all those experiences here, COVID life, that's where the resilience that you develop starts to stack up, because then the bigger the challenges, you've already had the experience to overcome something more difficult in the future.
Yeah.
That is brilliant, Kevin.
Can I add to that?
Absolutely.
And I'm thank you, Kevin, for illustrating that. Oh wow, you nailed it, and that's the beauty. We have to survive. So in private, we're surviving and kind of creating that resilience, and we're learning from all those experiences. And so when we come into a COVID-19 world, and I'm doing this now in my sporting career from the experiences I've learned in my past, this is exactly where I am, where he circled in terms of COVID-19, as I'm taking all those years of learning and the highs and the lows and the impact of that. And I'm now seeing COVID-19 as an opportunity. I'm seeing it as a portal of change rather than being impacted and seeing this as a negative in my life. And I'm actually now taking that forward in my design career, my sporting career, and helping even like the greater Commonwealth and Olympic bodies of sport to move into a new future. But I had to go through all those highs and lows that Kevin, as we've experienced, and having to kind of constantly reinvent yourself all the way through the processes and question yourself every single time. Am I doing this right or am I doing this wrong? And then you deal with the depression issues that are aligned to that, and the impact of that, and the loneliness and all the other things that are accumulated for that experience. And then you have those little ups, and where also you become public and you talk about something, or you have an event experience or whatever, and then you go back down. But what happens, and the way Kevin does, those things become closer and closer and closer together. This has been my experience anyway, that I have more ups than I have less downs. The downs are a lot lesser. And now I'm in a position of leadership where before, the very same people that were trying to oppress me over my sporting career are now asking me for help.
So interesting, Kristen. I want to talk about something that's very much in the news right now beyond COVID. There's been some stories over the last couple of years, and you talk about loneliness and going through a battle with the sport leaders. And nobody knows that better right now than Olympic champion Caster Semenya, who was actually in the news a week or so ago after she lost the latest in her longstanding battle with sports leaders who want her to take hormones to reduce her natural testosterone level in her body, which is higher than other women, in order for her to compete at the Tokyo Olympics. I don't want to get into in the science of that right now, but what I want to ask you, Kristen, just in terms of educating the public, when people talk about, when the sports world talks about Caster Semenya, they often talk about gender disorders or disorders of sex development. And you write in your book that you can't stand when people put it in that way. Right. I wonder why that is, what we can learn from Caster and her story and the way it's portrayed.
Well, first of all, thanks, Dave. This is a big question, and I'll try to surmise this in a really short, as best as I can for everybody. And I think Kevin may be able to help me to relate to this as well, is that we in our society tend to put people into boxes based on the physicality, the culture, the diversities, and it's kind of this kind of top-down approach to our society and in the world that we've always lived in, it's kind of this world of accommodation. And kind of coming from my sporting world and also my design architectural world, I look like an elevator shaft. And so we have a top-down approach, and when we're doing this, and what we're not doing is recognizing people for their abilities, and taking and building a world that enables people to reach their true potentials, and not limiting them based on their physicality, or placing limits on their heads based on socially designed top-down approaches. And what I've been working on was around the human-centered design approach. So what we're doing is taking away those boxes and allowing and having a bottom-up approach. And so we're designing a world as best we can for everybody. And I think this is the opportunity with a COVID-19 world. So when it comes to Castor, I've known Castor since 2009. I was very involved with her first case, and I continue to be involved in this scenario behind the scenes. It is a heartbreaking situation because a lot of it has been, in terms of her specifically, she has been caught up in a world that her physicality is her normal. How's the best way to explain it? And so what we're asking her to do is to change her physicality to meet a social need or a social identity, of which we've created the sporting system. We haven't adapted the sporting system to meet different physicalities of sport. And what we've done is try to oppress those individuals to fit a commonality. And we're not even talking about the conversation in terms of her physicality and as it relates to women and men in sport. And the issue is that we're trying to put a square peg into a round hole. And I very much went through that exercise myself, in which affected my health. It's no different than what happened to Castor, what's going on with Castor. And what she's afraid of is what I went through. And so the issue is, it's really about how we think about our humanity, how our sporting system and what it's actually meant to do. And I use an example because I'm involved in something with the Commonwealth right now, and the sport of lacrosse. It's really interesting. Everybody thinks of lacrosse as a sporting event. The indigenous communities in Six Nations, when they developed the sport, was designed for the purpose of medicine. And the sport was actually designed for the purpose of reconciliation. So it was designed for creating a world of indifference, to reconcile indifferences. It wasn't about becoming that elite level athlete and being the best of the best of the best. It was about bringing community together and figuring out ideas and bringing resolution to community. So it's we society and how our professional sports system and Olympic sports system have kind of narrowly focused from a top-down approach in a very elite level of sport that really only synthesizes a very small group of people in Canada, let alone internationally. It's a very small level of people that are engaging in sport at that level. And so we need to be able, in terms of our changing how we see this in our best practices, to make sure that we're developing a system that is designed to ensure that individuals, no matter what level of play they're in, are able to reach their true potential without putting limits on them.
Just to come back, thank you, Kristen. Just to come back to you, Kevin, with a final question for this session. Kristen talks about helping people reach their full potential. How much, based on your diagram of the roller coaster, how much do people really need to understand that life is this journey? It's going to be a roller coaster, which is why probably we love roller coasters as much as we do, and hang on for the ride type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll end with this. My signature keynote is about the hero mindset, and it's about focusing on small things that make a big difference to become a hero in your own movie. And when we think about a hero, it's easy to define them as a police officer, a veteran, someone that's maybe got a badge, or an athlete. But if you look up the definition of a hero in the dictionary, a hero is defined as a person either admired or idealized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. And we all have that inside of us already. And we all love the comeback story. We love the story of the hero and the hero's journey. It's just we're sometimes too afraid to live it ourselves. And so this is our opportunity. Every single person on the planet right now has this opportunity to write their hero's journey, their story. Yeah. And so if we can focus every single day on three things, hero moments here. So first is hero moments where we accept responsibility, knowing that we may not be responsible for what's happened to us in our life, but we're always responsible for what we do about it. Hero decisions where we decide to take things one step at a time. Learning to walk again was not an overnight thing. It was one toe, then another toe, and three, and then three, and an ankle and an ankle. And every goal we achieve in life is going to happen one step at a time.
Yeah.
And the third thing is around just taking hero actions, that every single day we'll have moments where we want to quit, and it's on us to continue to push forward and fight and feel fear and do it anyway. And if we can do those three things every single day, we're living through the best time in the world to write our own story, and each of us can show up and become a hero in our own movie.
Wow. This has been amazing. Kevin, Kristen, thank you very much. Kevin Rempel's book is called Still Standing. Kristen Worley is the author of Woman Enough. Thanks to the two of you for joining us and helping us talk about this very important topic of mental health, resilience, and sport. Thank you again. I'd now like to welcome back our festival director, Sundeep Misra. Sundeep, wow, that's a wrap on an incredible few hours, an incredible day. What a day. We heard from some great authors, some participants from Canada, from India, and the UK. When you first came to me a couple months ago, I wasn't sure, Sundeep, how we were going to pull this event off in the middle of these COVID-19 times and bring the first ever Ekamra Sports Litter Festival in Canada. This has been amazing. I'm curious what your biggest highlights of the day were.
Well, thank you, Teddy. You say that we wouldn't have pulled it off, but I think you've done it. I mean, I've been watching you, I've been watching others, I've been watching the authors, the moderators, including Scott and Anesthesia. I think this has been such a tremendous, in one day, in 6 sessions, I personally, I'm a journalist, 23 years into the profession, but each session has taught me so much. And when you ask me the highlights, I was actually looking forward to Scott's conversation with Stuart about the 82 Brazil, because, it also touched me at that point of time, like it touched Stuart. He was a 10-year-old. I was in class 10 at that time, just getting out of school. But the gender inequity was the highlight for me. And when Sarah spoke, she talks about having a voice in sport is very important. And I just jotted down those lines. It's not about our bodies. It's not about our boyfriends, and not about those questions whether we are married or not. It's about to be celebrated for being an athlete. And I'll just give an example here. Duti Chand is the 100-meter national champion in India, and she's the first Indian athlete to come out as gay in the country. And since then, since the moment she came out, which is a hugely courageous decision, looking at our culture, looking at the way India looks at most of the athletes. But today, if a media house wants a story, if a television station wants a story, if a website wants a story, they say, okay, can we have a little bit of, how did she come out, the portion about her being a gay, which is not important at this moment of time, because what's important is, her going to Tokyo, her training, her financial incentives, whether she has the right coach or not, but nobody really bothers about that. And that's what that gender story, with Anesthesia out there, it was absolutely brilliant. One more example is, I think even during that session, we said about Elaine Thompson, she ran 10.85, and this deals with the coverage that women get in sport. Now, 10.85 is stunning. Looking at the last session that we had, because of COVID, has taken our mental toll on most athletes. But doing 10.85 was for me as a journalist, for me as a track fan, it was tremendous. And just to put into perspective, if Usain, when he was running, had done a year's best time, if Asafa Powell had done a year's best time, if Justin Gatlin had done a year's best time, if Christian Coleman had done a year's best time, this would have been a big chunk of the newspaper devoting its sports pages to it, but not Elaine Thompson. So these are the highlights that I took from the sessions today. Of course, the 82 was tremendous for me as a fan of the Brazilian team. Watching Scott and Stuart was itself. Watching Scott was also a lesson in terms of how you do a session And, and with Stuart, you could see that he was so happy doing that session, so happy writing that book. And this is what writing is all about. And tomorrow is September 19th. And this is just on a personal note. Roger Angel, he's somebody I have followed since I was a kid. I mean, we have read him, in the New Yorker and everywhere. And he's written humor pieces, talk pieces, profiles, short stories, book reviews. But what he did was bring a fan's voice to the sport. What he did was bring a joyous voice to sport. And that's what writing is all about.
I couldn't agree more, Sundeep. I really appreciate you bringing the festival to us here in Canada. I think it offered so much to so many people. My highlights were the spot fixing and taking a look at one of the greatest scandals that the sports world has ever seen and learning a little bit about that. I also will remember for quite some time Kevin Rempel showing us the journey of life and what we're going through and what he's been going through his whole life. And that to me is an incredible diagram that I will have in the back of my mind throughout my life, because I think it's helped Kevin and I think it can help so many more. We not only had a great lineup of authors, we had some outstanding moderators, as you say. Thanks to all of them for taking the time and for being involved today. Thanks to Arup, to Shireen and our team in India. And of course, thanks to PJ Kwong and Rachel Holt here in Canada, who did so much of the legwork behind the scenes. Also, thanks to Sports 999 and its founder, Babita Gupta, for supporting this venture. Thanks to you again, Sundeep. We couldn't have done this without all of you. And we hope to be back in person next year here in Canada. Hope to see you there. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.